I'm also very excited about our topic, Happiness 2.0. Although actually, Happiness 2.0, ELT and new ideas from positive psychology and the science of well-being. And actually, instead of Happiness 2.0, I should really probably call this Well-being 2.0. Because well-being is the bigger picture. Happiness is important, but it's one aspect. And I want to try to look at that, at positive emotion, and how we can use that in the English language teaching classroom, but in a greater context. And I'll mention what that's about in a minute, but new ideas from positive psychology and the science of well-being. For the past several years, including a few presentations at KOTESOL, I've been talking about ELT and the science of happiness, positive psychology, in the classroom. And I think this is a powerful tool, but I want to start out with a caveat, and I mentioned this at my workshop earlier this afternoon, because some of you are going to go back to school on Monday, and you're going to talk to your colleagues, you're going to say, hey, I saw this thing on positive psychology, on happiness, and like, these are ideas we can use in our classroom. And some of your colleagues are going to be, great, tell me more, and some of your colleagues are going to be, happiness? I mean, hello? We're already responsible for listening and speaking and reading and writing and grammar and vocabulary and testing, and now you want me to be responsible for happiness? And I don't think it's about responsibility. I think it's more about opportunity. But regardless, every one of us, everyone in this room, and every one of those colleagues deals with educational psychology. They either deal with it with awareness, or they deal with it by default. But we all deal with educational psychology. So isn't it better to be dealing with it in a mindful way? And we know from neuroscience, happy students learn more. Happy students work longer at tasks. Happy students approach those tasks with more enthusiasm. And the whole time this is going on, their brains are alive with neurotransmitters, dopamine, endorphin, serotonin. The learning centers, the whole frontal cortex is lighting up with connections. Happiness is good for learning. And that, I think, alone makes it worth exploring as teachers. Now, what is positive psychology? Because some people don't know. It is not the power of positive thinking. That's a philosophy. That's not science. Positive psychology, okay. Traditional psychology has been about mental illness, about mental disease, depression, etc. And that's important stuff. But about 12 years ago, when Martin Seligman of the University of Pennsylvania was president of the American Psychological Association, he and some other people like Barbara Fredrickson and Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi launched a movement called positive psychology to look at mental health. What's going on with happy, mentally healthy people? And the good news is we know. Sonia Lubomirsky, University of California, Riverside, is one of the important researchers in this, and she's identified 8 behaviors that seem to come up in happy, mentally healthy people. And they are happy people remember good things. Yeah? You know, when you were growing up and your mom said, count your blessings, she was right. People who count their blessings, people who notice the good things in their life, are happier. Happy people take time to say thank you. Happy people do kind things. It's ironic, isn't it? You do something kind, that person's happy, but you're happier too. It's kind of like a positive spiral. It's the altruism that Tim was talking about this morning. Happy people take time for friends and family. Happy people forgive. Forgive others, forgive themselves. Happy people stay healthy. Did you know, exercise 3 times a week can be as strong in dealing with depression as psychotropic drugs. That's how important exercise is. Happy people notice good things as they happen. Yeah? And that's different than remember good things. Remember, that's past tense. As they happen is mindfulness. That's the present. Happy people learn to deal with problems. Tal Ben-Shahar of Harvard says, you know, there are only two kinds of people who don't have problems. Psychotics and dead people. Take your pick. We all have problems. Happy people learn to move past them. When I first came across Lubomirski's list a few years ago, what struck me as, well, as English teachers, we're already dealing with a lot of this stuff. I mean, friends and family, health, those are very common topics in any first-year textbook. Remember good things, that's grammar. Remember, it's the past tense. Noticing things as they happen, that's the present or present continuous or habitual present, some kind of present, that's grammar. Thanking and forgiving, those are language functions, language routine. We're dealing with a lot of this anyway, and positive psychology gives us a chance to go so much deeper, so much more substantial than what's your favorite sport, who's your favorite movie star. So, I think it has real possibilities. So that's the background on ELT and the science of happiness. Now, just about a year ago April actually, Martin Seligman, who I mentioned earlier, sort of the grandfather of positive psychology, launched a new book called Flourish, in which he proposed a model called PERMA. And PERMA stands for positive emotion, which is happiness. Many of the researchers don't want to talk about happiness because it's not scientific. Positive emotion means the same thing. Engagement, relationships, meaning, and accomplishment. What Tim Murphy was talking about with agency this morning. And all of these, I think, are practical things we can do in the ELT classroom. And I'd like to share some ideas very quickly, starting with, things that help our students flourish, starting with positive emotion. And frankly, I think of the five, this is the one that we can most easily make use of in the classroom, because this is the one, it connects to the classroom, and it connects to specific language points, the grammar, the functions, etc., that I mentioned earlier. And I'd like to show you a quick activity. This is in your handout. Did y'all get a handout? Anybody did not? Okay. Could the volunteers by the door, could they help? Okay. We'll get you one in a second. But 3 good things. And how this works, this is actually an intervention that psychologists use, and I've just adapted it for ELT. What you do is think about the past 24 hours. What are 3 good things in your life? Actually, make it quick. Please think of one good thing that happened and why. And that can be why it's a good thing or why it happened. Okay? So, to give you an example, dinner tasted great tonight. Okay? And why? Well, my mom's a good cook. Or I was really hungry. Or pizza's my favorite. Or I helped make dinner. And you see what's happening with the why question? We're broadening and building it. Okay? Dinner tasted great. That's remembering something good. Why? My mom's a good cook. Well, that's kind of like thanking, right? It's acknowledging, maybe acknowledging family. I was really hungry. It's recreating the situation and how good it tasted at the time. Pizza's my favorite. That's habitual. That's, noticing things as they happen. I helped make dinner. It's helping. Okay? So it's called broadening and building. And as we notice good things and expand it, that increases positive emotion. Now, in your handout, you have a very small version of a handout that I give my students, and I ask them for 1 week, please write down 3 good things every day. And this is what's interesting. This is from the research published by Seligman and Chris Peterson at the University of Michigan, and Park Nam-suk from, she was Rhode Island at the time. This is really interesting. They did this experiment with several hundred students in the United States, and they were actually testing 5 different positive psychology interventions, and this is the one we're looking at, and to blow it up, 3 good things. Now notice what happened. They spent 1 week on it, and it started out, they're comparing it against a placebo, and it starts out, the placebo's winning. But this one week activity, it's 6 months of positive results. Because what happens is when you're noticing good things and why they happen, you get in the habit. 6 months of positive results on happiness, 6 months of drop in depressive symptoms. Okay? Think about that. 7 days. This only takes about 5 minutes a day. You're talking roughly a half-hour time investment, and it gives you 6 months of results. That's a great payoff in terms of time. And when I've done this with my own students, I do a survey like 2 months later, and well over half report continuing to notice good things like they did during that 1 week of homework. I should mention, on your handout, I shrunk all of the activities to make them fit. I've got a website that has like 50 different things you can download, and it's all free, and it's eltandhappiness.com. So I hope you will check that out, and you can get better copies and actually use this stuff with your students. Okay, so that's positive emotion. That's happiness. That's what I was talking about earlier today. That's what most of the activity on my website is, but I want to keep going to get to the others. Engagement. Engagement. When you and I talk about engaging students, we know what we mean. We mean mental engagement. But when you talk to the students, you say, engagement, they're going to say, huh? And, of course, I don't mean that kind of engagement, but it's kind of the same. Because it's between people. It involves intense energy, it involves passion. Yeah, it's kind of the same. I want to do a quick activity to show what I think this means. This is a giving reasons activity called Thank You to the World. We said one of the things that happy people do is take time to say thank you. How many languages can you say thank you? What's the person next to you? Wow, I'm impressed. Okay. And why do you want to thank those countries or those cultures? And so, for example, I might say, I want to say grazie to Italy, because they gave the world some great art and pizza. Okay? Or I want to say 감사합니다 to Korea for... English teachers always say kimchi. What do students say? I teach in Japan, okay? What do my students say? K-pop. Exactly, K-pop. Never forget the kimchi, they're going for culture. Okay. Or I wanted to say sheshe to China for... Pandas, yeah, and everything a daiso. With the person next to you, think about 1 minute. I want to say 99, thank you, to country, culture, for something. Guys, while we're doing that, the assistants are going to give you another handout. Please don't open it yet. Please don't open this handout yet. Okay, so, what'd you get? Language. French, I want to say merci to France for French wine, French cheese. Okay, great. So Mexico for tacos, all right.
I want to say salamat to the Philippines for San Miguel beer.
Okay, San Miguel, okay. Why don't you, Mark? Okay, you get the idea. It's what's the language function? Giving reasons. It also helps students know about what they know. But did you notice, what was that? That was a drill. Yeah? But it was hopefully more engaging because it was more difficult. It was more challenging than a regular drill. The teacher would say, "Thank you, Italy, pizza." Honestly, thank you. Right? The teacher just provides the information. The students generate it. It's more challenging, and what's interesting is there's another word that means the same as challenge. It's called difficulty. Yeah, except challenge sounds good and difficulty sounds bad. Yeah? And there's another word that means the same as difficulty, but it sounds really bad. Stress. Right? And we all think stress is bad. Have you seen, do you know the linguistic llama on the internet? I mean, who says all these pithy little language things, including, "I want to be a schwa. It's never stressed," right? And we think that, and it's wrong, because if we didn't have stress, you would not get out of bed in the morning. Yeah? We need stress. But we need it in appropriate levels. I want to do a quick activity. Did y'all get the little handout? Don't open it yet. With the little red one? Okay, we're going to do a little experiment with this, so that's why I'm saying don't open it yet. This is anagrams. Do you know anagrams? Just rearrange letters. So T is an anagram for either eat or ate. Right? You just rearrange the letters, get the same thing. Dormitory? Dirty room. You knew that before. Yeah. Dormitory is an anagram for dirty room. You get the idea, okay? Now, what we're going to do, when I say go, and this is an individual activity, so please don't do it with your partner. You're doing it alone. When I say go, not yet. When I say go, look at the first word, then close it, find the anagram, write it down if you want, or at least mentally find it, and then when you know, please raise your hand so I have an idea how fast you're going. Okay, ready? Number one, look at the word. Your hint is lucky. When you know the anagram, please raise your hand. Okay, some of us got it. Okay, close the paper again. If you didn't get it, don't worry, because some people, it's a puzzle, and some people are better at these than others, so don't worry, okay? Ready? Number two, your hint is, the word is a fruit, the answer is another fruit. Go. Okay, a lot of us got it. Okay, ready? Close the paper, close the paper. Okay, number three. Ready, go. No clue. 2 syllables. Now, this is interesting. How many of you got 3 correct? Do you think? Yeah, 2. Is there something with the feng shui of this room or something that's like, or maybe, what, 1, 0. Yeah. I cheated. I cheated because that was the point of this. You see, what happened is there are 2 different handouts. This half of the room has a different one. And you guys had rats, and I said lucky, and you got lucky star. And you guys had chance, lucky chance. There is no acronym. And then the second one, lemon. Like they say, when life gives you melons, you may be dyslexic. You guys had raisin. There is no anagram. But by the time we got to number 3, looped. You had poodle, but many of you had already given up. And I did two very bad things. Did you notice that? I said, number one, raise your hand when you're finished so I know. Which means you guys were struggling. What is that? I can't find it. And all these people, yeah, I'm stupid. Right? And then after the first one, I said, don't worry if you didn't get it. Because some people are good at puzzles and some people are not. Never praise ability, praise effort. Because when you praise ability, you're encouraging, you don't have to work at it, you're good at this. Praise effort. Okay. It's called learned helplessness. And students need stress, but if we have the stress at too high a level, we teach them to give up, which is why many of you got 0. You should have gotten that last one, but you said, I can't get these, right? There's an expression I like. Success comes in cans. Failure comes in cannots. We need the challenge. We don't want to make it too easy, but we need the challenge so students can be successful. And it has to do with flow. This is flow from a psychological viewpoint that Richard Semihai talks about. And flow is when you are just totally in to whatever you're doing. Time stands still. Athletes talk about being in the zone. That's flow. And basically how it works is you have two axes, challenge. And the more challenging something is, the more anxiety you feel. Skill, and the easier something is, you get bored. And the key is, we're looking for the sweet spot in the middle. And one way to do this in the classroom is find activities that lend themselves to flow. For most students, it won't be all the time. But certain activities are good for it. For example, carousel, which is also known as 4-3-2, also known as fluency workshop. And basically how it works is you and your partner, A talks to B for 4 minutes. B listens, then they change. Then change partners, A talks to C for 3 minutes. Giving the same mini speech or whatever. And then finally A talks to D for 2 minutes. And what's happening here is the first time is pretty difficult. It's new, they're saying it's high stress. Second time, they've been through it once. We're raising the challenge. They have to say it faster, but they know what they want to say. And it becomes easier. They become more skillful. And by the third time, many students report they're no longer thinking about language. They're only thinking about their content, which means they're starting to think in English. This is a flow activity. So that is engagement. I want to share actual relationships. And when scientists study it, it's often family relationships or relationships in the workplace. With us, it's obviously student-student relationship, student-teacher relationships, and it's about rapport. Yeah, and for me, I was talking about with somebody earlier, it's about learning names. And how many of you find it difficult to learn the names? Absolutely, absolutely. And I don't know about you, I've probably got, I teach at a women's university, okay? I maybe have 250 students. Now, they all have about 20 teachers, male, female, young, old, foreign, native, they have a whole range. I have 250 students, all of whom are 18 to 22-year-old Japanese women. Thank God for hair dye, so at least I have a chance. But learning names, the way I do it is I have to make name cards. I try to learn names, I should do. I have to make name cards, encourage them to personalize it, and then I collect them every class, and I get to class 2 or 3 minutes early and hand them out, because it's a way to pressure myself. It's increasing my stress level as a way of helping me learn names. Something else, rapport building. And if you get rapport down, everything else is going to work. And if you don't get it down, nothing's going to work. It has to do with the amygdala. And the amygdala is the part of the brain that handles threat. The amygdala is a small almond-sized part of the brain. And when you are under threat, under bad, serious threat, it's called amygdala hijack. Okay? This is the part of the brain that handles the fight, fight, flight, or freeze response. Okay? And give you the reason you are here today. Sometime in the past, thousands of years ago, your ancestors came across a threat, and I don't know what your ancestor did, but it worked. It might have been fight, throw rocks at it. It might have been flight, run away. It might have been freeze, because predators can't see things that aren't moving. But your ancestors made the right decision. They became a survivor, and you're here today. The people who are not here today, and I don't mean just because it was a nice day they didn't come. I mean, the people are not here today. Same situation, they thought, oh. Your ancestors became survivors, their ancestors became lunch. Now the deal is, most people are not dumb enough to put themselves in that situation anymore, but we do sometimes come across serious threats. Not often, but we have not evolved beyond what to do with that. And so take, for example, the tragedy on 9/11. And the number most people associate with the 9/11 tragedy is 3,000 deaths in the Twin Towers. Do you know about the 1,595? This is the number of people who died within 1 year because they refused to get on airplanes. These people died in car accidents. Yeah? Because when we are stressed, we make bad decisions. Now that's from a book called Science of Fear, and I mention it because it's not my number. I don't know how they got 1,595 and not 1,600. But realizing that almost over half as many people died because they made bad decisions as died in the attacks themselves. Now, most of us do not face terrorists in the classroom. I know some of you do teach junior high boys, but how about situations? A little extreme. I think he was calling in to report a really bad PowerPoint. I mean, that's extreme, and I hope none of us are ever that stressed. But how many of you have heard the expression, don't smile until second semester? Yeah? Yeah? We have that thing, so we go in and act really tough? Is that really what you want to be doing? Do you really want that kind of relationship with your sister? We know that people reflect smiles, people reflect frowns. Dude, is that how you want to start off your relationship? I want to try. Well, okay. The deal is, when we are stressed, when we are threatened, fear overrides new learning. So it becomes reflective, it becomes reflexive, not reflective. Fear overrides new learning. But I want to try a little experiment. And can I ask you to stand up? And turn so you are facing the person next to you. So I need A and B. In the case of a group of three, let's have A and B and the observer. Okay? Everybody go? Now, A. Show of hands. A. Great. A, when I say go, your job is a major frown. Eye contact, direct eye contact. A major frown. B, a big smile. Look directly at your partner. Go. Smile usually trumps frown. Yeah? So I think that's what I'm thinking about as a teacher. My job on day one, I want to start establishing the rapport. And I go in, and I've been teaching I've been teaching since God was a child, okay? I walk in, even if I'm nervous, a big smile, because the students start to smile back, and we've got the first step of rapport. Rapport, have a seat. Rapport builder number one is to smile. Why did I have you stand up there? Well, eye contact was easier, but there's another reason. How long do your students sit down?
8 hours.
8 hours. Did you know when you sit down for 20 minutes, the blood is going south? You start to get a blood buildup in the butt, feet, and lower legs. By standing up and moving around for just 1 minute, you get a 15% increase of blood to the brain. And that means an increase of oxygen to the brain. Physical movement is good for learning. And, especially those of you dealing with younger, as I was talking to teachers today at high school, junior high, God did not design 15-year-olds to sit still all day. It's a way of, it increases your control, actually, because you're orchestrating what's going on. So, look for chances for students to stand. If you do a dialogue practice, have them stand up and do it. Gesturing's easier. Finding a partner. So turn to the person next to you, stand up, find a new partner, so you have to walk around a little bit. Drill short speaking tasks, look for that. Here's the next part, meaning. Meaningfulness. One good way to make it meaningful is to personalize. I ask students to, for example, think of someone special in their life. For many, many of the students, they're going to choose somebody in their family. Yeah? Or a special teacher. I'm sure if I did this with you, most of us have had a special teacher at some point, and that's part of why we became teachers. Someone who helped you, maybe a coach, somebody special. And I asked the students to think who they'd like to write to say thank you, and what they would say. And to give you my own, this is a true story. This is Mr. Stevens. And when I was in high school, Mr. Stevens was my principal. Or more exactly, he was my assistant principal. And the Americans here know the nuance of assistant principal. Okay? The ex-coach who's in charge of discipline. Okay, end of my first year of high school, I get this note that says, report to Mr. Stevens' office. This is me. And I go, and I go, and he said, Mr. Stevens, come in, Mark. And I'm obviously nervous. He said, don't worry, you're not in trouble. I said, I'm not. I said, no, it's time to sign up for classes for next year. And Mark, you should think about taking child development. Now this is long ago, right? And back then there were boys' classes and girls' classes. And boys took wood shop and metal shop, and girls took home ec and child development. So I said, child development? And he said, Mark, you should think about being a teacher. I'm 15 years old. I want to be a disc jockey, okay? So I took child development for totally the wrong reason. It was a girls' class. I said, okay, I'll go with it. And it was really interesting. So then the year after that, I took a course to be a teacher's aide in an elementary school, half day every day. And I went to university, became an education major, and then went to grad school and to do ELT. And the reason I'm here today is because of Fred Stevens. And so a couple of years ago, I wrote him a gratitude letter. This is, some 35 years or longer after he put me on the path. And I explained to him, this is what I want to thank you for. And this is something I have my students do. I have a couple of forms, and they write the letter twice. Once in English and once in their L1, which in my case is Japanese. And then, so I don't care, write it in Japanese first, or write the English first, doesn't matter. But then they translate this little paragraph. In my English class, we've been talking about important people and events in our lives. My teacher asked me to write a gratitude letter to someone who had helped me. I decided to write to you. Because in Asian countries, being that direct often doesn't happen, right? So this is kind of like my teacher made me do it. And then they bring it in the next class, and I cut it in half, and I take the English and give them an envelope, and if they don't live at home, a stamp. And they often say, really? And it's up to you. It's totally their choice. Most students do. Most students write to a family member. And most students choose to give it to them. The best way is to read it together. And I've heard wonderful stories. So I read this to my mom, and I just cried together. And I remember one student said, so I read this to my dad, and he looked at me and said, what did you do to the car? Anyway, this activity was developed by Christopher Peterson at the University of Michigan. And he was very excited about it. Great results. Was telling his students about it. He had a very smart grad student named Park Nan-suk, Korean woman, and she raised her hand and said, like, this is new. We do this every year. Teacher Appreciation Day, right? And so what we have is a positive psychology activity that your students already get culturally, but they've probably never done it in English. Yeah? And so this is an opportunity to use something that already makes sense to them and use it to establish that meaningfulness, to deal at a potentially heavier level than they might have. Okay, the next part is accomplishment. It has to do with goals and setting goals. A quick story. I go to a lot of conferences. My wife usually does not want to come to conferences because she says, you guys sit around and talk about English language teaching all the time. And I said, well, yeah. But a few years ago, I got invited to a conference in England, and she said, okay, I'm going to that one, and we're going to start in Italy. I said, good. We'll have to figure out how much it's going to cost. And she said, actually, that's covered. And I said, pardon? And because what had happened, she had earlier decided she wanted to go to Europe, so she went to Daiso and bought one of those banks that you can only open with a can opener. And because it's hard to save enough money to go to Europe, right? But every time she got a 500 yen coin, 500 yen is about 7,000 won. Every time she got a 500 yen coin, she put it in the bank. And she had enough she had saved enough to go to Europe with this, which I thought that was amazing. Since then, she's done the same thing a couple of times, including she and one of her friends did a gourmet estate tour of Korea, where they started out here in Busan with the seafood, and they were getting massages and all these cool things, where they scrape off the first couple of millimeters of your skin and stuff. All this, and they worked their way up the country, Seoul, with gourmet food and that kind of thing. It's a great way. Now, what I used to do is have students set the goals and then break it down small enough. What are you going to do today to work on this? And then they would talk to their partner. And then I learned something that was really interesting. And Tim was talking this morning about TED Talks. I'm sold on them as well. Just watch this and actually do what he talks about.
Please think of your biggest personal goal. Okay, for real. Take a second. You gotta feel this tonight. Take a few seconds and think of your biggest goal. Imagine deciding right now that you're going to do it. Imagine telling someone that you meet today what you're going to do. Imagine their congratulations and their high image of you. Doesn't it feel good to say it out loud? Don't you feel one step closer already, like it's already becoming part of your identity? Well, bad news. You should have kept your mouth shut, because that good feeling now will make you less likely to do it. The repeated psychology tests have proven that telling someone your goal makes it less likely to happen. Anytime you have a goal, there are some steps that need to be done, some work that needs to be done in order to achieve it. Ideally, you would not be satisfied until you'd actually done the work. But when you tell someone your goal and they acknowledge it, psychologists have found that it's called a social reality. The mind's kind of tricked into feeling that it's already done. And then because you felt that satisfaction, you're less motivated to do the actual hard work necessary. So this goes against the conventional wisdom that we should tell our friends our goals, right? So they hold us to it. Yeah. So let's look at the proof. 1926, Kurt Lewin, founder of social psychology, called this substitution. 1933, Mahler found when it was acknowledged by others, it felt real in the mind. 1982, Peter Douglas wrote a whole book about this, and in 2009, he did some new tests that were published. It goes like this. 163 people across 4 separate tests. Everyone wrote down their personal goal. Then half of them announced their commitment to this goal to the room, and half didn't. And then everyone was given 45 minutes of work that would directly lead them towards their goal, but they were told they couldn't stop at any time. Now, those who kept their mouths shut worked the entire 45 minutes on average, and when asked afterwards, said that they felt that they had a long way to go to achieve their goal. But those who had announced it quit after only 33 minutes on average, and when asked afterwards, said that they felt much closer to achieving their goal. So, if this is true, what can we do? Well, you could resist the temptation to announce your goal. You can delay the gratification that the social acknowledgement brings, and you can understand that your mind's mistakes are talking for the doing. But if you do need to talk about something, you can state it in a way that gives you no satisfaction. Such as, I really want to run this marathon, so I need to train 5 times a week. Kick my ass if I don't, okay? So audience, next time you're tempted to tell someone your goal, what will you say? Exactly, well done.
Okay, by the way, that's on TED. There's a URL on the back of your handout if you want to use that. And you notice I had the English subtitles. They do have Korean subtitles, so if, that's heavy content, you might want to play it twice for the students. First time in Korean, or with Korean subtitles so they can read what's going on, and then the second time with English subtitles. But I find it useful. So that is the PERMA model. I want to hit a couple of other things. I mentioned Sonia Lubomirsky's work earlier. I mentioned Martin Seligman. This is Barbara Fredrickson. And Fredrickson teaches at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. She runs the Positive Emotion and Psychophysiology Lab. And she's really serious. She will not say happiness, because that's not scientific. She only talks about positive emotion. And for something so serious, why does she run the PEP Lab? But anyway, she did a book a couple of years ago called Positivity that explained, among other things, a ratio. It's called the Lasorda ratio, after the South American guy, Argentinian, I think, who actually discovered it. If we can reach a situation where we have 3 experiences of positive emotion to each negative one, we reach a tipping point. And I didn't know until I read this. Tipping point is actually a scientific concept. I thought it was just a metaphor, like the Malcolm Gladwell stuff. The scientific concept, the easiest explanation, the easiest example is water. And the tipping point is 0 degrees. Ice turns to water, water turns to ice. Now, one little icicle might not matter, but ask any polar bear, tipping points are a big deal. Now, what happens to us as humans when we reach that 3-to-1 ratio? Good things are happening, we notice that. And then you reach the tipping point and poof, it's like positivity explodes. Positive emotion explodes. Creativity explodes. All of these good things. And the key here is you don't have to have 3 good things happen for every one negative. You have to have 3 experiences of positive emotion. Yeah? And so the way I introduce this to my students, Fredrickson has identified 10 types of positive emotion. And I'm going to introduce them to you exactly the way I do it with my students, except I do it more slowly with my students. And I'm going to mention 10 types of emotion. I'd like you to think about when you do, or when you have felt that way. Okay? And so we'll do it just like I did with my students, starting with joy. We've all experienced joy. Can you take a minute to just think about a time when you felt or when you did feel joyful? I'll give them 30 seconds, 45 seconds. And then go on to gratitude. And they might not know the word gratitude, so I say that just means saying thank you. When do you say thank you? When do you feel thankful? And serenity. When do you feel peaceful? A peaceful mind. And interest. The girl's obviously very interested in the butterfly. The butterfly's interested in getting the hell out of the jar. When are you very interested? This is flow. You're just so into it that you don't even notice time. Hope. When do you feel hopeful? Pride. Now, many students have a negative image of pride, being prideful, being boastful. But pride itself is well deserved. She's graduating from university. She deserves to be proud. It's a good emotion. And one that everybody loves. Amusement. And inspiration. When do you feel inspired? And awe. Sometimes there are no words. Sometimes things are just so wonderful. There are no words. And love. And not just romantic love. Family love. The love you have for your friends. And I ask my students to think about these, and I give them a minute or two to let their minds wander. Mentally recreate the situation. I encourage them to think about the WH questions. Yeah? Because the WH questions help them get more specific. It also does what psychologists call an active constructive response. It means you go, when did that happen? It's moving you toward a deeper experience. And you end up, then you talk to a partner, and they describe the situation, and they end up re-experiencing the positive emotion. When I do this with my students, in checking with them, usually over 85% of the students report re-feeling that emotion. If they're joyful, they feel joyful again. If it's hope, they feel hopeful again. You're recycling the emotion. And in terms of what we're doing as language teaching, these are engaging, personalized, multisensory activities, and in your brain that helps focus, that helps memory, and that helps with motivation. All the things in the drive that we're talking about with the theme of this conference. Which gets us to savoring. And savoring, to attend to appreciate, to enhance positive experiences. And you can savor in the past. It's called remembering good things. You can savor things in the moment. And you can anticipate. And that's savoring in the future. And can I ask you to look at this page of your handout? This is not a mistake in printing. I did that on purpose. So you have activities from one side and the other information for the other. And find the savoring logo. And we have time. I'm going to ask you to talk to your partner for about 1 minute. But before that, there are, 14 or 15 questions on this page. Can you just read over the questions? Which would you like to talk about? Maybe check the interesting ones, the ones that are interesting for you. And as you're doing this, please think, what do I want to say? How am I going to say it? Okay. Notice what's happening mentally. When you're choosing the questions, you are automatically re-experiencing the situations, right? Yeah, when you read talk about a good friend. You're getting that mental picture of your friend and why he or she is good. And just choosing questions lets you re-experience that situation. Okay? I said we were going to do it, but I don't think for time. I want to get through a couple more ideas. Okay, but that's savoring, and I hope you'll try it. I also think anytime I'm doing a fluency activity, I like giving the students more questions than they need and letting them choose. Yeah, choice is good, and it gets them started on something positive. I mentioned Taliban Shahar earlier, and I'd like to go somewhere with that. A metaphor borrowed from and expanded on from Taliban Shahar. And I say borrowed because it sounds so much better than stolen. But I am expanding on it. And in talking about savoring, Ben Shahar asks, what is the best song ever? And his answer, and I think we'd all agree that is absolutely brilliant song. So we give that a 10. The only problem is, and here's where I'm expanding on it, and I think we were all shocked in February when Whitney Houston died. And she was a brilliant artist. But that is not actually a Whitney Houston song.
Dolly Parton.
It is a Dolly Parton song. And it is also, it's not about romantic love. She wrote it when she was leaving the Porter Wagoner show. It's about love for her mentor. And it's country and western, so that ought to get a 10. Okay, so let's give Whitney a 9.5 and Dolly the 10 she deserves. And then the second best song ever, and I think we can agree on this. The Ode to Joy for Beethoven's Ninth, which is absolutely brilliant. So we put them together, and Whitney is a 9.5, and Dolly is a 10, and Beethoven is a 9.5. And you put that all together, a 29. No, you don't. You have noise. What we can learn from this is what we need to do to savor is to simplify. Yeah? When you get home, turn off your cell phone for a couple of hours. When you're playing with your kids, don't be surfing the net at the same time. Do one thing at a time. And to try to walk the walk, to try to do this myself. Some of you were at the Pechakucha thing earlier. Summer before last, I went to Thailand and became a seminar, a novice monk, which led to some of the more interesting how I spent my summer vacation stories. But one of the things we did that I found really, really fascinating, we did a lot of regular meditation like this, but we also did walking meditation, vipassana, walking meditation, where you might take 15, 20 minutes to walk from here to the other wall. And it's very slow and mindful, and you notice every muscle, and you notice every movement, every breath, and it's wonderful. And I was thinking, wow, how can I share this with my students? And then I thought, Mark, that's really, really stupid. Because can you imagine walking, okay, guys, we're going to walk across the room with mindfulness today. I don't think that lesson plan's going to fly. And I mean, number one, if you're into it, it's wonderful. If you're not, it'd be really, really boring. But also, there's no language. It's like you lift, forward, down, shift, lift, you know, forwards, that's all you need. And so it's not a very good language learning lesson. So I said, well, how can I use the idea of mindfulness in the classroom? And I came up with something called human robots, which is in your handout. And here's one of the weirdest instructions I've ever written. Work with a partner. A, you are a robot. B, you are the robot master. robot controller. And it gets at Vipassana meditation and mindfulness because the robot, number one, must talk like a robot. And the robot has to say everything he or she is doing. Okay? So the robot, the controller, says, stand up. I am standing up. Turn left. I am turning left. Walk 4 steps. I am walking 2, 3, 4 steps forward. So the robot is using language, present continuous, but is totally aware of every minute, of every movement, and is talking about it. So, and just to make it more fun, I blindfold the robot and make it more challenging. So you have some activities there that will connect it to the classroom. I'm almost out of time. Memory check. What is PERMA? Don't put your hand up with the person next to you. Positive emotion, engagement, relationships, meaning, accomplishment. Okay, thank you all very much. I hope these ideas are useful. I hope you and your students' English and your teaching will flourish. And we're almost out of time, but I'd like to do very quick time for Q&A. And if possible, I'd like to ask the first question. Because I've had a chance, and I ended my session earlier today, so sorry for the repetition here, but I think it's useful. I've had a chance to talk about these topics in several different countries, lots of different situations, and I tend to get one of two results. Number one, great, I can use this. My students need this, I need this. And the other reaction is, great, but. And the but are things like, great, but I've got to teach a particular book, or I've got to teach a particular curriculum, or I just don't have time, or the always famous, happiness is not approved by the Ministry of Education. And so, which is an issue. You don't have a dedicated class for this. So the strategy is to steal time. You might not have a whole class, but you can usually find 10 minutes for a warm-up, or a cool-down, or an energy builder, or a fluency task. So on the website, I wrote a thing called, a bunch of handouts, called 10 Minutes for Happiness. They're very quick, positive psychology-related, positive emotion-related tasks. So I hope you'll have a look at that. It's 6 o'clock, so we need to end because there's a closing ceremony, and then I hope many of you are going to dinner. Thank you all very much. After the ceremony, I'll be around if anybody wants to talk to me. Good luck and great happiness.